And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents, and welcome back to Today with 2 Cents, wrapping up your weekly news. Incidentally, happy St. Patty's Day. I know it's a day early, but since we're streaming today, for all you Irish folks out there, and for anyone who's not, but just enjoy St. Patty's Day, happy St. Patty's Day. Joined right now by Scorch88 and Captain Pipsqueak. We're going to be talking about three specific news stories that have been dominating the headlines this week, and whatever else might come up. But we'll jump right in. So obviously, I think anyone who's watched the news for the past 48 hours knows that the biggest news story this week was, or the one that definitely came to dominate the headlines, was the shooting that took place in New Zealand on Friday. Where the shooter entered a mosque, killing at least 49, at least 20 others injured, and all while streaming the event on Facebook Live for at least 17 minutes before the video was taken down. He also posted a manifesto on the internet in which he named PewDiePie and Candace Owens as two of his inspirations, or at least who he connected with the ideology which he espouses. And of course, the Prime Minister of New Zealand has responded predictably by saying that the country is going to respond by tightening gun control laws. Now, I should say, obviously, I think regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, we can all agree this was a terrible terrorist event, and this guy does not deserve any recognition or fame, which he undoubtedly wanted. But I unfortunately got to say, I think he's the ends he sought to achieve, which is the media blowing this up and responding by condemning particular political figures that allegedly inspired him to go on this, like, because PewDiePie is mentioned in this manifesto, or because Candace Owens is mentioned in this manifesto, they're somehow responsible for the fact that he went into a mosque and killed all these people. Obviously, that's ridiculous, but there are news commentators that are trying to say as such. Predictably, there are news commentators saying that Donald Trump is responsible for this because, let's face it, if something bad happens, Donald Trump must be responsible. But there are important questions to be asked, like, is there anything that could have been done to prevent this? Would stricter gun control measures prevent this? And what exactly are the gun control measures that New Zealand actually had in place before this? So quick, if either Scorch or Pipsqueak, you guys have anything to say, go ahead.
You guys, it's still very sad what happened, but obviously, you said he did this just to stir things up, and I believe it's more the fact that he's trying to accelerate the downfall of our be able to coexist, pretty much divide everyone even more and more.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the only believable thing in his manifesto is he wanted to cause chaos and disruption, which he's successful to, because people just jump on this kind of thing. And he calls himself everything from an anarchist to an eco-fascist in that stupid document. So I wouldn't take anything this guy says seriously.
No. Yeah. So the document is probably made by multiple people. So I don't think he was alone either.
Oh, no. I know so far one suspect has been named. Two others have not been named. Personally, I don't believe in ever naming the suspect. Obviously, I think as a matter of public record, they need to take down the name, but I don't think it's ethical for media companies to ever list their names or show their pictures, because as we've seen ever since Columbine, a lot of people, these shooters and these terrorists can make all kinds of extravagant claims about why they did these attacks. But ever since Columbine, research has been done that has suggested a lot of these guys do this just because they wanted to be famous and they want their name and picture to be on every TV camera worldwide. And when you do that, you're only encouraging future would-be shooters to do this kind of thing again. So yeah, I think the media reacting by at all and trying to suggest that PewDiePie or Candace Owens or Donald Trump or whoever else is responsible for what happened, and thereby we need to take guns from law-abiding citizens, or or as some more alt-right types are suggesting, that this is further proof that we need to segregate people by race or religion so that people aren't tempted to do these kind of things. It's the kind of societal civil war, if only verbal civil war, but I would measure he really wants this to lead to an actual civil war. And even if that hasn't quite happened yet, it's definitely, it certainly hasn't hurt the situation. So in that respect, he's getting what he wants. But next, the question needs to be asked. Okay, we all agree, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, this was a horrible event. Heart goes out to the families of those that lost loved ones. But in retrospect, is there anything that could have been done to stop this? Well, the one thing I haven't heard a single news media outlet say that I think could have been done about this, I don't know, and I haven't been able to find any sources that suggested whether or not this mosque had any kind of security personnel or protocols. But certainly, no one seems to be pointing out the fact that had there been an armed security officer or armed civilian in that mosque, potentially they could have stopped the shooter, and maybe not as many people would have died. Incidentally, I've been doing some research about what exactly what were New Zealand's gun laws prior to this shooting taking place. Well, in the country of New Zealand, in 2016, this is all according to the BBC, by the way, which I haven't had a lot of time to fact check this, but it's from the BBC, so I'm going to assume it's at least generally accurate as far as the brute facts are concerned. In 2016, New Zealand police estimated there were 1.2 million legal firearms owned by civilians in the entire country, or 1 for every 4 people. Pretty high firearm ownership compared to a lot of other countries out there. In New Zealand, you must be at least 16 to purchase firearms in general, or 18 to purchase a, quote, military-style semi-automatic weapons. I've not yet found any specific definition as to what they consider military style. But in order to purchase a gun, you must have a license, and obtaining a license means you must pass a criminal background check, which reviews both your criminal and medical records, as well as factors like mental health, addiction, and domestic violence. And despite such a high firearm ownership throughout the entire country, police also estimate that in 10 years prior to 2017 and 2018, there were gun crimes are remarkably low. In response to an official request for information last year, so 2018, the New Zealand police seized at least 859 firearms as a result of criminal investigations. And between the years 2017, and in the decade prior to 2017, 2018, so I'm guessing that means about mid-2018, there were a total of 28 homicides that took place in which the firearm that was used by the offender had a license for the firearm. There were 126 homicides where the offender had never held a firearms license. So at least even despite their laws, in the majority of firearm-related homicides, the person who used the firearm did not actually have a license, as law requires. What exactly does that tell you about criminals and their respect for the law?
Gun control don't work.
Yeah, exactly. Criminals kind of by definition don't obey the law. So if you think that by passing new laws you're going to stop them from committing crimes, you are sadly mistaken. Actually, this makes me think of a video Shane Killian recently did, where he basically pointed out that deadly firearms are being manufactured in mud huts all over the world. It's really not, apart from what people may think, it's actually not that difficult to get your hands on a firearm or to even manufacture them. Oh, and further, it seems to me that New Zealand is at least a pretty good evidence at this point that high firearm ownership does not automatically translate into high firearm crime. Any and all efforts of gun control, obviously law-abiding citizens will obey the law, and it will make it more difficult for them to obtain firearms, which at least 2.5 million times per year civilians use firearms to protect themselves from crime. No, the mainstream media never talks about that. But since just quick before we started, Pipsqueak was letting us know, since he's from Australia and people often cite Australia as this, great haven of firearm control. Could you quick summarize what you had been saying before about how exactly the police categorize firearms in Australia?
Yeah, so Australia works on a category system. So, in essence, all self-loading rifles require either you have to be a farmer with an actual homestead and land, or you have to be a professional target shooter, which requires you to go to multiple sporting events per year, the quotas and all that crap. And that's just the categories. Actually getting the license itself can be a massive chore, and it is very well known in gun circles in Australia that if you put self-defense as a request to have a license, you will be blacklisted, and you'll never get a license for the rest of your life, basically.
Yeah, you're not allowed to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that is I know people often say, Australia instituted this nationwide gun buyback program after a particular mass shooting, and after that, shootings have gone down. But what they don't tell you is that shootings were already going down before that took place. So there's no direct evidence that the gun buyback itself actually had anything to do with the fact that firearm homicides were going down, or that criminals actually turned in their weapons when it occurred.
Oh yeah. So they estimate that only 30% of all registered firearms affected by the mandatory confiscation. It's not a fucking buyback; it was a confiscation. But they only got about 30% of all registered firearms, and that's just the registered firearms.
Mm-hmm. So, bottom line, predictably, gun control does not work. Criminals do not obey the law. If anything, all gun control does is take firearms out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. Could you argue that some gun control laws make it more difficult for criminals to get firearms? Sure, it makes it more difficult for them to get it legally. But in any country in the world, even ones with absolute gun bans, criminals still seem to do a pretty good job of getting their hands on firearms. So no need to beat that any further. Bottom line, what I think the takeaway needs to be from the New Zealand shooting is stop doing exactly what terrorists want and responding exactly the way they said in their own manifestos they wanted you to respond with the media. Also, the mere fact that a tragedy occurred is not a justification to pass laws that will at best do not change the situation, and at worst make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. I really wish someone was talking about the fact that perhaps if this mosque had its own armed security, maybe this, not to say maybe he'd have selected another target, maybe he wouldn't have chosen to go forward with it, maybe even if he had gone forward with it, someone would have been able to stop him before as many lives were listed. So that's all I have to say about that. Moving on, next, prior to that actually taking place, the biggest news story of the week was this big college cheating scandal, including some big name celebrities such as Lori Loughlin of the TV series Full House, who, incidentally, I was unaware that Lori Loughlin had a daughter that was a YouTube Instagram model. And I'm going to say for the record, she's gorgeous. But that is actually relevant to the story here. Because as far as this, I guess the nature of this college admissions scandal is that a gentleman by the name of, give me just a minute, I lost my spot in this article. By the name of William Rick Singer. So the scheme's mastermind was William Rick Singer. Essentially was running a scheme where celebrities, CEOs, and other high-income type individuals could pay in order to cheat their children's way into high-profile colleges like Harvard, Yale, USC. I don't really count USC among the Harvard, Yale type college reputations, but whatever. That was one of the schools that celebrities tried to cheat their way into. Among them, Lori Loughlin, Felicity Huffman, 50 others. Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman being two of the more famous ones. But how it would work is either, it seems, fake information would be created implying that their children were athletes and thereby being recruited to a athletic team of some sort, or they were helped to cheat on their SAT. Basically, they got fake documents saying they had a learning disability, which thereby made it easier to put them in a situation where SAT or ACT standardized test administrators could cheat and make sure they got scores high enough to get them into these colleges. And perhaps the whole part of this story I found the most amusing. So Lori Loughlin's daughter, Olivia Jade, as I said, drop dead gorgeous Instagram, YouTube model, clearly has income. She will not. If she was smart with her money, she would never have to work a day again in her life, despite the fact she's only in her early 20s. Yet Lori Loughlin paid $500,000 some dollars to cheat her way into USC. And Olivia Jade, when she was accepted at USC, posted a video online explaining how excited she is, but how difficult this is going to be working as a model and trying to go to school at the same time. She'd work with the school's administrators to try to make this work. But she ended the video saying, the bottom line is, I don't really care about school. I want to go to games. I want to go to parties. And then, yeah, I don't really care about school. So say what you will about Lori Loughlin's success, Olivia Jade's success, and how much money their family had. You're telling me that you paid $500,000 to cheat your daughter's way into school so that she could go to games and parties.
Yeah, college is a joke at this point.
Well, it really is, and I think this whole scandal shows it. I mean, it used to be the case that you go to college in order to learn valuable skills that will thereby make you in higher demand in a certain job market so that you can be more successful down the road. Nowadays, though, especially with the push for student loans, government subsidized education, we need to ensure that everybody has a chance to go to college. What frustrates me to no end in this debate is that no one ever seems to point out the fact that when you go to, all right, we already have compulsory education to go to high school. So virtually everyone has a high school diploma. If you go to an employer and say, and he says, why should I hire you as opposed to someone else? And you say, I have a high school diploma. That doesn't mean squat to him. Everybody's got one. And once everyone has one, that means you don't stand apart from anyone else. So, but because it's compulsory, that makes it a necessary precondition to get a job, but not a sufficient precondition. And the basic law of supply and demand in economics is in play here, which shows that the government cannot. What really determines the health of an economy, the number of jobs, the number of goods and services available, is just that: the number of workers, the skill set they have, the number of resources that are available, and how many goods and services can be created with all those things. The government can pass laws. The government can hold guns to people's heads to make them give up their money. The government can print more money, but the government cannot create resources and laborers and skilled laborers and jobs out of thin air. Inevitably, supply and demand readjusts and fixes the economy back to where it was. So just giving everyone a college education will do is make it so that those jobs that are specialized and skilled will now have to get some sort of further education or something even beyond what the government offers in order to be more qualified. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
But my general education, though.
Yeah, exactly. You got to go to college. It's so important. Really, when children are saying that the most important part of college is going to sporting events and partying with their friends, you know there's something. I mean, stop and think about this for a minute. Couldn't you still go to sporting events and party with your friends even if you weren't going to college? Okay, I'm just going to grant, for the sake of argument, going to sporting events and partying in your early 20s is a super, super important part of being successful in life. I know it's a stretch there, but I'll grant it for the sake of argument. Does it follow that you then need to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to take classes that give you no marketable skills while you're doing that?
Nope.
No, of course not. You could just do that. So yeah. My whole take on the college cheating scandal, I mean, it is kind of, on one hand, it's kind of slimy in that, there are other kids that were working really hard to get into these schools and that were denied access because other parents are paying off to get their kids in there. But at the same time, it's like, why are we even sending kids to college anyways? The only reason you should go to college is because you believe you're intending to learn marketable skills that are going to help you contribute to the economy and make life better for everyone. If you are going to college to go to sporting events and go to parties, how about skip college and just go to the sporting events and parties anyways?
Yep. I'll even tell my own kids, as a market right now, I'll tell them to go as a skilled jobs right now. Skilled labor is on a deficit of personnel. So jobs are begging for people.
Yeah, we need plumbers, we need carpenters, we need machinists, like we need mechanics. These are things everyone says, those are blue collar jobs. Well, take a look. There's still a demand for them. And actually, people who choose to forego college and enter those careers, if they stick with the career, often by the time they're 40, 50 years old, they're way better off than their counterparts who went to college, who at 40, 50 years old are still paying off their student loans. Meanwhile, they have careers.
No debt.
Exactly. They've got a career making at that point 5, if not 6 figures and no debt. So I know which side I want to be on. All right. And final point of discussion for the week. I did deliberate quite a bit about what to talk about, but I couldn't resist but to come on this one. So as we all know, it's reached that point in the year where in the U.S., the news media is starting to talk more and more about the 2020 presidential election. And we know at this point, a number of big names have entered the race. Bernie Sanders is going for another go, despite the fact that he's 86 now, or he will be if he spends 8 years in office. Kamala Harris, up and coming senator from California, who is both black and a woman. That's her main claim to fame. And now Beto O'Rourke, the Texas politician who recently lost to Ted Cruz in a senatorial race, announced this week that he is entering the race, and the mainstream media absolutely loves him, despite the fact that. But here's a discussion that I think is worth bringing up. So the whole liberal message right now, it seems to me, hangs on at least 2 different things. First, there is the collab video that came out between me and Night Shift 10,000 this week that talked about the basically neo-Marxist theory of privilege, where the bourgeoisie and the proletariat have now morphed into the privileged and the non-privileged. And rather than just having these 2 classes, it's more of a spectrum. Specific things make you more privileged, like being white or being male or being cisgendered. And then other things make you less privileged, like being an ethnic minority or being a woman or being LGBTQ, XYZ, whatever. and people essentially fall into this spectrum. So it more or less expands on the original Marxist class warfare theory. So they've got that. Then you also have the traditional socialism, Marxism, which is, the whole Bernie message, fight the 1%. Billionaires are evil. They're stealing from you. They're keeping you down. The only thing you can do is trust the government to step in and take the money from the billionaires and give it to you, because no amount of hard work could ever allow you to succeed. So it seems to me, if that is the platform the Democratic Party is going to embrace, their best hope for success is picking someone who embodies at least one, if not both of those things. Now, Beto O'Rourke is a white cisgendered male who comes from a very wealthy, well-off family, who is married to a woman who also comes from a very wealthy, well-off family. Therefore, I'm trying to figure out exactly how does he help perpetuate either of these 2 things. He's clearly, by that standard, he's privileged. He's a white, cisgendered, straight male, and he doesn't exactly fit the whole, the poor need to stand up against the 1% thing, because he himself is a member of the 1%. So I don't feel like he really helps them boost either of their agendas, yet for some reason the mainstream media sings his praises.
It's probably because he's giving a shitload of money to the Democrats. I mean, the Democrats are about as corrupt as they can get.
Yes.
The Republicans are no better most of the time.
Oh no, that is absolutely true. And I mean, I'm going to take the time to say, I don't believe elections are really a farce anyways. It's not like take a look at history. It doesn't matter whether there's a Republican or a Democrat sitting in the White House. It doesn't matter whether which party controls Congress. No matter who controls the government, two things always happen. The government spends more and it increases the scope of its regulatory authority. That doesn't change. Therefore, if you think you're going to make the country better by electing a new politician, think again. Nonetheless, it's still humorous to me because, I mean, the efforts that both these parties go through to push these particular narratives, trying to get themselves into office. Yet, you know, we have it just kind of shows the tribal mentality that everyone has. On one hand, you're pushing these particular narratives, yet someone like O'Rourke seems to stand against both of those. Regardless of what he espouses politically, it seems like he's a symptom of the problem. So, if their view is true, yet they're willing to overlook it. The Democratic Party is a huge advocate of the whole Me Too thing, despite some of the biggest abusers of women ever were Democrats like Bill Clinton, Al Franken, Keith Ellison, and Justin Trudeau. Of course, he's Canadian, but comes from that same line of political thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm gonna say I don't ultimately know who will get the nomination. What I can say is, if the Democratic Party is trying to win on trying to be consistent with their platform, it seems to me their best bet would be to either make Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders the nominee, and then whoever gets the nomination pick the other person, because then they have both the black female and the crazy socialist. And again, despite the fact Bernie owns 3 homes, yet he is himself a member of the 1%, yet he blabs on and on and on about we got to stick it to the 1%.
Yeah. I got a friend that supports him, and I point out all his inconsistencies, but he's like, I don't care. I just want free college.
Yeah, it's fun. I love how Bernie loves to talk about Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is so evil. He has way too much money. Bernie is a member of the 1%. Yet, tell me what meaningful thing has Bernie in his entire life? How has Bernie improved the lives of others? I don't know. Jeff Bezos, on the other hand, created Amazon.com, which, say what you will about all of Jeff Bezos having all the money he has that money because people use Amazon because it makes their lives better. So Jeff Bezos deserves to have his money. Bernie does. Bernie's 3 homes. Honestly, I would have a lot more respect for Bernie if he would just take one of his homes and put a bunch of low-income immigrants there and allow them to shack up and enjoy life there, perhaps paying them a UBI of like $2,000 a month. Maybe I'd have a little bit more respect for Bernie. At least he'd be living a little more consistently with what he claims to be the way society ought to be.
But his mouth with money where his mouth is.
I see Martin Wicker brought up creepy Uncle Joe. I did forget Joe Biden also is actually, I don't know. Has Joe Biden formally announced, or is he just floating the idea?
No, he's not going to win.
I honestly don't know.
Election.
Yeah, but Joe Biden, also known as Creepy Uncle Joe, because it's been documented that in numerous photographs that were taken in the White House, he essentially was rubbing up on underage girls and telling them that they're not allowed to date until they're 30. But besides the fact that numerous Secret Service agents even report that the guy's a total creep.
I still say that unless the Democrat Party pulls another Hillary Clinton where they take all the votes and give it to someone else, I say the Yang is going to probably win. But
okay, you know what?
That's my prediction.
Okay, yeah, and Andrew Yang. What's interesting, his case kind of fascinates me because the mainstream media is not really touching him, but he's like on YouTube especially. Everyone's talking about him and specifically his proposal for a $1,000 a month UBI.
Which is stupid.
Now, at this point, I've made 3 videos on UBI, so I think I've already stated my position on that. But again, the fact that people advocate a UBI shows that they don't understand basic economics. Now, I am a bit concerned about the number of people who claim to be libertarians who support a UBI now. there is the only argument I can possibly see that could justify a UBI would be saying, okay, welfare or UBI, which is the lesser of two evils? And I think there is a case to be made that if all welfare, like every welfare program that currently exists was abolished and in place a UBI was put in place, you can make the case that that would be less bad than the current welfare system. But it still wouldn't mean that a UBI in principle actually helps the economy, because again, the government can print more money, the government can steal more money from people, the government cannot create goods and services, and it is the amount of labor, resources, and total goods and services in an economy that actually determines how wealthy or how poor a country is. If you give everybody $1,000 a month, all that increases demand, but it doesn't actually increase the amount of goods and services available. As the poor, especially the poor end of society, who now is most, their situation is allegedly bettered the most by their extra $1,000 a month, as they go out to buy things that they previously weren't buying, the demand for those things goes up, but the supply actually hasn't increased, which means the prices will increase accordingly. Therefore, I mean, the people who spend the money first, the government, get lucky because they get to spend it before the inflation actually takes place. But even if it's not, now granted, I think this is an important point to make. It's not necessarily inflation, because inflation is when the government actually increases the money supply and prices thereby go up because the ratio of goods and services to the ratio of dollars has actually changed. In the case of UBI, people say, oh, no, that won't happen because the government's not printing more money. They're taxing money from the rich and giving it to the poor. Okay, so even assuming there's no inflation taking place, which there still would be, incidentally, but let's just assume that's a perfect experiment. That's what takes place. More money is taken from the rich and given to the poor, so the poor now have more money to spend. The actual amount of money in the economy hasn't changed, but again, it's the poor who are currently not buying these certain things now go out to buy those things since they have extra money. Demand for those things increases, but the supply of the things they're looking to buy hasn't increased. Thereby, the prices increase for the very people that the UBI was supposed to help. So,
well, actually, you could probably go further than that. It's like, because the money that's been taken, who are you going to take money from? Well, it's automatically going to be business owners and investors. So that's actually going to decrease the supply of available capital for investment and creating new businesses. So what you're essentially doing is you're driving up demand and suppressing supply. So it's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Thomas Sowell, in his book Basic Economics, which I've recommended many times on this program, if you have not read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, please do. It explains all these things in such simple fashion. He basically points out that this stuff is so simple to understand. The problem is politicians always know that there are more people who don't understand economics than people who do. There are always more tenants than landlords, and there are always more workers than business owners. And as a result, all they have to do is spew rhetoric about giving you what you deserve and helping people, even though the evidence shows that it doesn't actually help people. Well, it helps though. It helps corporate cronies and wealthy benefactors. It doesn't help. It never helps the people that the laws are invoked to help.
Pretty much, it helps the corporations because it kills out the small businesses, and it helps the politicians to get out of office because pretty much they're buying the votes through your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't realize it.
Litigious Society said here, I could see libertarians supporting a UBI in the form of a prebate like in the fair tax. Of course, that would mean there would be no income tax as a compromise. I think what you might be referring to there is, I know Milton Friedman supported, I believe it was Milton Friedman who supported a negative income tax, which is kind of like a UBI. It's essentially, but instead of everyone getting it, it's if your income is below a certain level, you are paid tax money instead of actually being taxed until your income rises to a certain level. So it's essentially a less bureaucratic form of welfare. And but Milton Friedman did not actually say that would benefit the economy. And don't quote me on this because it's been a really long time since I looked into it, but I'm pretty sure what he said was that he saw that as, like I said before, he saw that as the lesser of two evils than the current welfare system. And he was being more or less a pragmatist, saying he knew the welfare system wasn't about to disappear, so he proposed that as a alternative that wouldn't be quite as bad. But
And
yeah, go ahead.
only other way I can see libertarians supporting this is those who want to see the economic collapse of the system. We just want to accelerate the whole thing, just make it happen now.
Okay. Well, actually, that accelerationism, as opposed to agorism, is a topic I'm thinking of having a separate live stream on all its own. But that is something worth debating. Anyways, taking a look at the comments section quick, see if there's anything else worth discussing. Oh, yeah, conservative Californian points out Richard Nixon also historically supported the UBI. Because everybody loves Nixon, right?
My mom does. She actually defends him all the time.
All right. Well, that being said, everyone ready for the weekly hottie?
Oh, yeah.
All right, drum roll, please.
Let's see. That's all I got.
Okay. This week's weekly hottie is Ari Dugarte, who did this particular bikini haul. And let's see, I was told last time, let's see if I can get let's do full screen this time. Excellent. So I don't know why in the past I didn't think to put full screen on, but Mag brought it up last week, so we're going to go ahead and be using full screen from this point forward. All right. And of course, I forgot to pull up my music, but it's a little late for that, so. All right. And I could keep playing this for a while, but anyways, Ari Dugarte, link will be posted in the description as always.